So I'd like to introduce to you today Jamye Waxman. Jamye holds her master's degree in education as well as clinical psychology. She's currently finishing her PhD at Widener University in human sexuality. She's a wealth of knowledge. She's been a sex educator for over 20 years, has authored a book or two. Maybe.
Or 4.
4 books. See? She's like so much. Every time I talk to her, I learn more. So that's just how she is. So thank you for updating me. And just some other details. She, besides Widener University, she completed her San Francisco Sex Information Training, the Urban Tantra Teachers Training, is also a member of camp, and is a clinical associate here. So she's very dynamic. I don't need to bore you with more detail. You'll get to have a direct experience. So today's topic is sex education for therapists and helping professionals. I hope you enjoy your presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, Douglas. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Like Douglas said, my name is Jamye Waxman, and I've been doing something around sexuality education probably since I was 11 and was first curious about my own sexuality. And now in my 40s, have figured out some of that stuff. And I think sexuality, the one thing I've learned is it's fluid and it's constantly changing over time. So where we are today may not be where we were yesterday or where we'll be tomorrow. So this lecture is going to cover a lot of different topics and leave out a lot of different topics around sex education and relationships. We're going to just jump into it by starting with a question. What do these 3 letters mean to you? S-E-X. And I like participation. I'm very into that. So I just want you to call out, when you think of sex, what comes to mind? Desire. Connection. Pleasure, passion. Fun. Intimacy. Discovery. I'm just going to put a damper on it for a second, but we're not going to talk too much about this, but abuse and coercion may also come up, especially with clients. Anything else that just comes to mind? Assault. Are there any acts, specific acts, and you don't have to shout these out if you don't want, that come to mind? What is sex? Because if you think back to a president we had not too long ago, when he defined sex, he left oral sex out of the equation, which really, I mean, it made kids think about what sex is, right? And you'll see later on, there's a Peggy Orenstein TED Talk that I recommend in here, which talks about what young girls think sexual pleasure is these days. She just wrote a book about it, and it's fascinating. And just how intimacy has evolved through social media as well, and through the way we communicate these days. So I ask you what sex means to you so that you just think about it, because whenever you enter a room with others, you're entering with your own biases, your own judgments, your own experiences around sex, the good, the bad, the pretty, the ugly, all of it. And what you bring to a room with a client is in that experience. I wanted to ask as well, how many of you, I know in my MFT program we had to have a sex education course. How many of you remember having good sex education at some points in your life? And was that before your training?
At CSUN they have a minor in human sexuality.
Okay, so but this was all in like above, like graduate or after you graduated from high school, it sounds like. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, as well. In Orange County at Orange Coast Community College, they have a great, well, they used to, I don't know now, but they used to have a great sexual education department.
Okay, and that's all voluntary, right?
Well, it's part of your coursework. So
Okay.
It counts as part of your unit.
But you don't have to take the sexuality
Not
course.
to take it.
Okay.
But I mean, it's one of the ones that pretty much every student goes to take.
Okay.
So it's one.
Yeah, and it's just a reminder too that, you know, we teach so many math skills and English skills in school, but emotional skills, relationship skills, these are supposed to be modeled by our family of origin or our family that we live with, right? And a lot of times if you think about those relationships and what the dynamics you had, or the sexual messages and images you saw as a child, the messages are really different than what we maybe perceive as healthy sexual relationships. We see that a lot here at CHS for sure. So I wanted to just bring your attention to a wonderful teaching tool called the Circles of Sexuality. And this kind of covers all the different areas one may think about when it comes to sexual identity, sexual orientation, behavior, values. So we have sexual health and reproduction, which is, again, intercourse anatomy. This is where we're going to focus a lot on today. But there's also sexual identity, another area we'll talk about today, intimacy, sensuality, and sexualization, what the media teaches us, what flirting and messages and images and seduction look like. And all of these circles play into our value system. So when you're talking with a client about what is sex, it's really nice if you have this visualization to be able to look at all of the different areas that you may want to address. When we do our assessments here, we ask people, what was your first experiences around sexuality, masturbation, sexual intercourse? Were these positive, negative? Were they traumatic? Was there anything upsetting about them? Especially like if a kid is caught masturbating and some parental figure says, don't do that, what are you doing? That message will stick with you throughout the course of your life and how you view your own sexuality. Also, identity. What pronouns do you use? How often do you make an assumption about what somebody must be like based on what they look like? Are you asking people, do you prefer he and him or she and her or they? It may not always be comfortable for us to ask that question either. And I have made the mistake a number of times by using the wrong pronoun with my clients, which is a wonderful learning experience and a great clinical moment. Do your gender identity and expression feel in line with the sex you were assigned at birth? Just think about that for a moment again. And what type of person are you sexually attracted to? So this is identity, orientation, and behavior. So somebody may identify as heterosexual. They may identify as married, right? But they may not be monogamous. A lot of time in the swinger community, I used to do a lot of work with them, and they'd say that they would go to their doctors, and the biggest mistake their doctors would ask if they were married was not to ask if they were having sex with other people. The assumption that if you are married, you are monogamous. And also, is the same type of person you're romantically attracted to the same as who you're sexually attracted to? In the African American culture, the down low culture was a big thing for men, right? Men were married to women but having sex with men. So really kind of dissecting where people are, where they're at, and how they identify is important. How many of you are familiar with the Kinsey scale? This was the first scale to identify sexual identity and orientation and behavior, right? So a 0 meant you were completely heterosexual on the scale. A 6 meant you were completely homosexual, attracted to same-sex partners. A 3 was bisexual. There was a great documentary made in the 1970s, I don't know if you can find it on YouTube, called Kinsey 3, about a couple. It was 2 men and a woman who lived together, and Uncle Frank was the uncle who was also part of the family. This system isn't used as often, but I like to pay homage to it because it was really the first system that recognized that we don't fall in one category. A 1 is more attracted to the person of an opposite sex, but also, thinks, fantasizes about someone of the same sex. 2 might even act on it. 3 does act on it, right? So really starting to think about this fluidity in relationships. I saw this on one of the blogs, sexual identity, kind of accurate, more accurate. Just, it's kind of all over the place when it comes to figuring out who we are. And this is more often used these days, the gender unicorn. I find this as a fantastic tool to use with people who are still trying to figure out where they belong, right? So your gender identity, and what you'll see, and if you look up the gender unicorn online, some of them are filled out. So people will put like a dot somewhere along the spectrum of where they feel like they fit in. Your gender expression. When you think about these things, and we'll get into feminine and masculine a little bit more, but just start to think about the associations you make with what it means to be feminine, what it means to be masculine, and what it means to be other. Your sex assigned at birth, who you're sexually attracted to, and again, who you're romantically and emotionally attracted to. So this is something great for clients who are just like, I'm really not sure what's going on. Maybe they don't even like labels, but they just want to have a clear picture of not necessarily having a label. This is the latest, it might not even be the latest one, but the one I've been using, LGBTQIAAP2S. How many people know what all of these? Okay. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, I feel like these terms are more widely used in media and around today. Queer, it's the kind of an umbrella term for people who don't even want necessarily a smaller label, right? Questioning, I have no idea what I am, or I'm not sure where I want to fit in. Intersex, born with genitalia that are both male and female. Asexual, doesn't really like to have sex at all, but may like to be in romantic relationships. Allies, people who support people in the LGBTQIAAP2S spectrum. Pansexual, which sort of goes along with queer for me, but I like to think of it as I think of it as Burning Man meets sexuality. So I know that's kind of a weird way to look at it, but like there's a lot more labels. Some people will say I like to be with radical fairies, and I'm all over the spectrum. Pansexual aligns with just you can present in many different ways, and I will still love you. I don't have one attraction. And two-spirit is a Native American term in which there are two genders embodied in the person and celebrated for both being masculine and feminine. A demisexual, a person who does not experience sexual attraction without a strong romantic and emotional connection, is more important than the romantic. And I actually see this a lot in my clients here who are having a hard time connecting. They need that strong emotional connection before sex happens. And then aromantic, a person who experiences little or no romantic attraction for another person. Doesn't necessarily mean they don't have lots of sex. So again, all of these terms, trying to find out where people are and where they fit in. Cis and trans. How many of you, anyone want to take a stab at what a cisgender actually, what the term means? Go ahead.
They identify as the sex that was assigned to them?
Yes, I got a little trigger happy there, sorry. I was like, yes, a person who identifies with their assigned sex at birth. I was born female, I identify as female, I therefore am a cisgender female. Transgender is a person who does not identify or exclusively identify with the sex they were assigned at birth. And it's really interesting if you think back even to just the experience of being pregnant, right? Is it a boy or a girl? Everybody wants to know. Everybody wants to give it a label right from birth. When I talked to my brother and sister are both MDs, and when they were doing their training, and I was talking to them about this stuff, and even intersex, like if they see an enlarged clitoris, a doctor's training is to make it smaller, even though it might be a small penis, right? Kind of really getting, everybody wants a nice label. If you ever want to really understand even more about the transgender, well, the movement around intersexuality, I should say, and just, well, I'll go there after because I realize it's not exactly that. But let's continue. Transfeminine, a person who is assigned male at birth and who identifies as female. And transmasculine, a person who is assigned female at birth who identifies as male. So sometimes you may hear F to M or M to F, female to male and male to female. But last year at the LGBT Center, I learned the more update terms were transfeminine and transmasculine. Where on the spectrum might your gender identity be between Barbie and G.I. Joe? And I am curious, when you guys think about masculine, the word masculine, what comes to mind? Rough? I don't know, in either. Aggro, testosterone. Left brain. Like aggressive. A myth. What about feminine? Demure, helper, gatherer, mother, caretaker, nurturer. So what I was going to say is that there's a wonderful book called As Nature Made Him. It's the story of John and Joan, which was John Money, who was a famous sex doctor. He wanted to prove that sex, well, he didn't set out to do this. He happened to get a case that landed in his lap. It was a botched circumcision. It was twins. One of the boys, it was at 2 years old that he needed the circumcision for medical purposes. Circumcision went wrong, the penis was burned, and as a result, they removed the penis. Parents found John Money and were like, what do we do? And John Money said, we condition your child to be a girl. She will grow up as a girl, and I will prove that it's nurture and not nature that makes people decide who they are, right? 15 years later, Milt Diamond, a sex researcher in Hawaii, or maybe 20 years later, came across the case when he found out that Joan was actually not happy as a girl, and at 15 had gone back to being a man, later on killing himself. And it was not indeed just nurture that played a role in how we identified. It's a really fascinating story. John Money did some wonderful things. This was not one of them.
You know, I use that in my class, and A Boy Without a Penis. You can see that on YouTube, which talks about this story.
Oh, fantastic. Great. A Boy Without a Penis. Yeah. That's great. I did not see that, but As Nature Made Him, the book is also is wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. Sure.
What was that slide at the bottom? Is there a name for that? What is that called?
This I actually just found online when I was Googling masculine, feminine gender identity. So I don't know the Barbie G.I. Joe scale, we can call it. But I don't know what it's called. It is fun, yeah. So I'm going to show you a few-minute clip right here. I just have to move over to start the movie. So I think this video brings up a lot of points that are really worth processing, and we won't have too much time to do it, but even that term passing, just using that term is pretty offensive. So thinking about even when you're talking to clients, and if you are talking with a trans client, not using the term passing would be probably pretty helpful. Also, I just like to share this. Transgender is not a verb, so there is never an ED at the end of it. And it actually can be very insulting when people hear transgendered. So that is actually not a word. There were some other things that came up in here, but if we have time at the end, we can bring some of them back up. Coming out. If you identify as heterosexual in this room, and somebody asked you every day what your orientation was, what your behavior was, what your identity was, imagine having to come out every day as straight. People who don't identify as straight, coming out is a lifelong process. And when I'm trying to normalize it for my clients who are experiencing questions about their own sexuality, this model has been so helpful. It's the Vivian Cass model of sexual awareness and identity. Stage 1 is being confused or aware that they are different. This is the first stage that people go through. I've shared, I'm a TMI kind of person, so I'll just share this in here. When I was 11, my first sexual experiences were with another girl, and I had a lot of questions about who I was. And I was confused, I was angry, I was scared, I was nervous. I didn't have anyone to talk to. The internet wasn't around then. And I just didn't know where to go or what to do. And I started to look around and see who could I identify with who may have had a same-sex experience. So I found Liberace and Rock Hudson. I was like, okay, I know that they're somewhere, I know they are, and so it's okay to be whatever I want. I remember I thought I wanted to be an actress, and I thought I'd get an Academy Award, and this girl would get up on stage and say, but she kissed a girl, and it would be over for me. Like, there's a lot of fear about not being accepted. Identity comparison, the individual compares their feelings and emotions to those that identify as heterosexual. Why me? What's wrong with me? A lot of thoughts, maybe what's right with me in this day and age, right? But a lot of thoughts going on to compare to other people who don't think so hard. I found that when I started in the sex education field, and I did a lot of different work. I've worked on adult movies, I've worked on toy shops, I've done a lot of things, and what I found commonly in the communities that I've worked in is that we all had experiences that made us feel other around our sexuality at a young age, and so we started seeking out what it was like to understand our own sexuality, and comparing ourselves to people who never had that question, no matter how we identified later in life. Identity tolerance, they start to accept themselves, tolerate that they are not heterosexual. then they start to accept that. That's stage 4, right? And when you lay these out for people who are going through these stages, they have an aha moment often about where they are right now. And then the pride, this is my favorite, where it's like, okay, enough, we know you're not straight, right? Like you're at all of the events, you're waving around, you're wearing the shirts that say, I am not straight, or whatever else it is, because you're so proud to finally be who you are. And then synthesis, you incorporate who you were and who you are back into who you will be. And this model has been super helpful. It might not have needed that apostrophe S, I'm not sure, but here we go. I wanted to just do another little video. There's only 3 videos in this presentation on coming out. And this is actually, I'm not going to play too much of this, but this is letters of kids who have not been able to come out, read by other people. So I'm just going to stop it there for time, but just noticing even if you think somebody isn't who they think they are, it's really important not to out somebody either until they're ready. The experience for everybody. So if you're sitting with someone and you know, I know you'd be so happy if you just were open to this exploration, really check yourself at where you're at and what your agenda is around this. Because there are reasons that this person doesn't feel safe to be who they may be. So now we're going to get into some anatomy. And these questions, again, just food for thought. What parts of your body do you think about most often and why? I'm imagining this too. I have a lot of clients that come in wondering about their penis size or penis function and are pretty obsessed with if it works. Or thanks to what you see online, a lot of videos of women with certain types of labia, and your labia majora or minora don't look like that, and you think something's wrong or ugly about you, or your breasts or something like that. What parts do you find most attractive, and what body parts do you find least attractive? What do you remember learning about your body and about masturbation? So as you can see here, we're going to go more into what Corey Silverberg, in his wonderful book for 8 to 12-year-olds called Sex is a Funny Word, talks about as the middle parts. Because when we call them private parts, we're suggesting a lot of things about them. Whatever private means to you, just think about. But when we call them the middle parts, we're acknowledging that they're parts of our bodies, just like our hands and our feet. We don't always show our feet. Our feet are in shoes a lot, so we don't call those private parts either. So just thinking, the middle parts are the parts that we don't expose to the world. In the beginning, if you have not looked at this picture from The Clitoral Truth, the best book on the clitoris in the world, I love this. In the beginning, all fetuses are female. Up to 8 weeks of conception, all of us are going to have vulvas. And here you can see what happens in the developing glands at 10 to 12 weeks. Here, the head of the clitoris becomes the head of the penis. The scrotum are the outer lips, the inner lips. The shaft are the same as the inner lips. Oh, so I'm sorry, I'm getting so excited that I'm going male and female all over the place here. This one's confused. And then we have the vaginal opening. So you can see everything, the equal opportunity orifice, the anus. It's the one thing that we've all got. We can all share experiences of pleasure around the butt. And the foreskin is actually the same as the clitoral hood. So when you think about a penis and a clitoris and you're talking about them, a lot of the parts are the same. The only difference, the biggest difference I should say, is the clitoris is the only organ designed exclusively and solely for sexual pleasure. The penis has about 3,000 to 4,000 nerve endings in it. The clitoris has 6,000 to 8,000 nerve endings in it. And the clitoris is not just the head right here. There's the head of the penis, the head of the clit. The clitoris actually has legs and the G-spot that we often talk about. That's part of the clitoral network. The last video in here is going to really help you get a visual of the clitoris like that. But as you can see, we're all born from the same bits. I have a client who's just learning this in their therapy training, and they now are calling everybody females with more testosterone and females with less testosterone. That's their new term for how it goes. And if I use a vulva puppet, I don't know if anyone has one of these. These are great. This one is not mine. I call mine Vulvita, because she's kind of an imitation. But here we have the clitoral hood and the clitoris, the inner lips, the outer lips. These are them right here. This is the vaginal opening. Most vaginas can't throw up like this, but this gives you a good indication of the vaginal opening. This ribbon right here, that's the G-spot. And this is the urethral opening. Men have one opening, the urethral opening. Women have a vaginal opening and a urethral opening. I have talked to people who have tried to have sex in their urethral opening, not knowing that it's their vaginal opening, and also thinking that they pee out the vagina. So it's really good if your client needs some education. These are also really handy because they stick really nicely to walls and other things. So here's the head of the penis. This is the frenulum on the underside. For a lot of guys, this is the most sensitive area of the penis. It's the V shape where the head meets the shaft. There is also more shaft under the balls. I have one more diagram to show you on that. Here's the scrotum. The ovaries and the testes, same bits, made from the same bits. There's spongy tissue in here that fills with blood. Of course, if anybody's having any medical conditions, before even talking to them, I'm going to do a few slides on ED, but you always want them to go to a medical doctor and make sure get a hormone panel and everything checks out as well. But it's always handy to have a penis and a vulva around. Here you can see the extra shaft right behind the penis there. Here you can see the urethra running through the penis. The prostate right up here. So if here's going in the butt to massage the prostate. I always find these diagrams, like, this one's not so bad, but a lot of them look like the butt's in New Jersey and the penis is in New York. Like they're so far away from each other when everything's so compact. But you can massage the prostate, and prostate health is really important for every guy. And you don't have to go in the butt to massage the prostate. This little indentation behind the shaft is another way that you can go and massage the $1 million spot, they call it, in The Multi-Orgasmic Man, which is a book that intimidates a lot of people because it's called The Multi-Orgasmic Man, but it's a wonderful book for men on educating them about their own bodies. When asked about the average penis size, 5.5 inches is what I always say, but here you can see it says between 5.1 and 5.6 inches. So when somebody's curious if they are average, I also talk about showers versus growers. Some people look bigger, some people grow to be bigger. If you are dealing with anybody who has a small size concern, one of my favorite videos that is online, it's 2 movies. A guy who had a small penis decided to do documentaries on this called My Penis and Me, and My Penis and Everyone Else's. And he really explores why do people care so much about penis size, talks to his dad about his own penis size. It's fantastic, talks about what to women he dates. And in the second video, embraces the universality of the many types of penises that are out there. Here are the middle spots. I think one thing that always concerns me is how much emphasis we place on the G-spot and vaginal orgasms. 33% of women can have an orgasm through vaginal penetration. We say alone, but really I think the clitoris plays a big role in that depending on how she's actually built. So here you can see there's one of the legs, the crura of the clitoris right there. You can see the vaginal opening. There's the equal opportunity orifice. I also just like to show that there are different vaginal sizes too, different vaginal widths, different vaginal lengths. The vagina, when it's aroused, blows up. The first 1/3 of the vagina can be operated on. I'm sorry, the first 1/3 of the vagina cannot. It's very sensitive. So when you have clients who have sexual pain through entrance, it's often in that first 1/3 of the vagina. The second 2/3 of the vagina can be operated on without anesthesia. Not that you would want to, but it just goes to show that there's a big difference in sensation between the front half of the vagina and the back half. When I educate clients on G-spot, I talk about just like exploring the whole vagina, and even like the P-spot, I like to call it the perineal. If you, instead of the G-spot is a come hither motion, and it feels like the roof of your mouth. If you rubbed your tongue on the top of your mouth, it's that rigid, like pringly, I'm thinking of potato chip feeling. The P-spot for me is the bottom of the vagina, and for a lot of women, that's a really sensitive area. There's also what they call the A-spot, which is further back towards the cervix. Nothing can get lost in the vagina, but things can go up the anus and not come back down. So that's important to know. So if somebody freaks out about losing a condom in their vagina, it's there. It didn't go anywhere. But up the butt, you may There's great, you can Google what doctors find up butts every year, and there's lovely pictures of things that nobody accidentally slips and falls on a light bulb. Okay, so here, Betty Dodson, I don't know how many of you are familiar with her work. She's known now as the grandmother of masturbation. She is also actually a fine artist, and this video about the internal clitoris is the last video of today.
The body is absolutely boggles my mind. Now, I've spent a lifetime drawing the nude. And when I actually discovered the internal clitoris, it was, I think it was in the early 90s. So, this is the internal structure of the clitoris. The leg of the clitoris, it's like a wishbone. Shaft of the clitoris. Clitoral glands. The bulbs of the clitoris that go down deep in the body on either side. We have nearly as much erectile tissue as men. We get erections too when we get turned on. But because it's internal, and most of us have been so badly repressed that we don't even recognize when it's happening. And here we have vaginal opening, urinary tract opening, inside the body. This is all inside the body. There's the perineum. It's a space between for a man it's between his asshole and his balls, and for a woman it's between her asshole and her vagina, the perineal sponge. Best of all is in the little, this is 8,000 nerve endings here, so this has got a lot. You can feel your clitoris get an erection. Well, let's go on down. I don't want to leave out the asshole. I must say I'm quite fond of the little buddy hole. It's cute. Here's the PC muscle. When you tighten your PC muscle, and you can feel it in your clitoris, and in your vagina, and in your anus, then we can deal with the external. So here we would have the outside. This would be pretty closed. You wouldn't see too much. And we'd have the inner lips, hopefully nice full ones. They're my favorite. Oh, outer lips. Now you're not going to see much of the pee hole in here, and the vaginal opening will be not easy to see either. Oh, I just can't control myself. It's different in absolutely every woman. It is amazing.
So there you go, the internal clitoris. Of course, the most powerful sex organ is the brain. And for time, I'm going to start running a little faster through these slides. When it comes to intimacy, I find that these days, kids these days, intimacy is very different. It's a lot of texting, it's a lot of chatting, it's a lot of swiping. So when you're talking to clients about what intimacy looks like for them, I just found that this was a really helpful way to look at 10 levels of intimacy, from talking to Twitter. We have certain authority figures that find Twitter as a really wonderful way to communicate. So how do people show intimacy with each other? Asking really detailed questions as a clinician or as a helping professional is really helpful to figure out what intimacy looks like. I use this with almost all of my couples, the 5 love languages. If they take the quiz online, it actually breaks down the percentages and how many points you get for each. because I find a lot of couples don't speak the same love language. And once they realize that one of them is into words of affirmation and needs to feel validated by hearing how much they are loved, and the other one's into giving gifts, they start to be able to speak each other's love language. Yeah.
Does the language, the result of this test, describe the way you receive love or the way you express it? I always have that question.
It describes the way you are. This is for how you receive. The quiz goes for receiving. Although you will notice that most of the time it's also the way you give. And it's also often the way you were given it as a child. So, but it is for what you need to receive to feel loved. Talking for a moment about consent, there's a lot of this in the news. One of the biggest things that you hear is it's ongoing, and I think that's really important. Someone can say, well, I said yes to a kiss, but no to a touch. Really important to know what is consent. It's ongoing, it's freely given, it's specific, informed, and as you will hear, it's an enthusiastic hell yeah, not like a So this is really important, again, for educating people who are maybe not sure if what they did was consensual, And here's a great way to say no. This is online. Marsha Basinski does it. Her asking for what you want. 12 ways to say no gracefully. Not available for anything like that right now. I need to build more trust before I'd be willing to consider that. Her name is Marsha Basinski, but I will not be able to spell her last name properly. It's Baczyianski. But the website is askingforwhatyouwant.com. So this is more about children and sex education, but I think it's a really important thing to talk about touch with kids, to let them, or even teenagers or whoever, to let them know that they have help them come up with a safety network. Who are 5 people you can go to if something happens for you. This book I gave to my 4-year-old, and we read it all the time. It's called No Trespassing. This is my body. And what I really like about this book is it doesn't talk about strangers. It talks about tricky people, because most people who are going to sexually assault and abuse a child are people they know. So it's really important not to talk about just strangers. And it's really great because the other thing that is so key to talking to kids about sex is identifying proper parts, calling it a vulva, a vagina, an anus, a clitoris, a penis, not a hoo-hoo and a wee-wee. Because then kids don't really know how to express this to others as well. And teaching them that their body belongs to them, and talking to them even about if they're young, if mommy and daddy wipe you, that's the only times that someone else can touch your genitals, or if I ask you if I can wash you, right? It's not okay for somebody to just go and do that. Yes, no, maybe lists are always helpful. A lot of the stuff that I'm giving you today it comes from an amazing website called Scarlet Teen. She has, Heather Carena, who's been doing the website for over 20 years, has an extensive yes, no, maybe list. This is just one page on body boundaries. And this is really a great way to get your clients to think about everything they might want done to them or not done to them. Having a partner's shirt or top off. Yes, no, maybe, I don't know, it's a fantasy or it's not applicable. But really getting to the bottom of what is okay for people. This is a wonderful TED Talk that is not going to play right now. It's called Why Pizza, Not Baseball Should Be the Metaphor We Use for Sex. Al Vernacchio does such a good job. Baseball, like a game starts at a certain time, right? 7:35, 1:35, that's when we know a baseball game is going to begin. Sex doesn't just happen at a particular time. I don't know how many of you remember first base, second base. First base is kissing, second base up the shirt, third base down the pants, fourth base home run is going all the way to sex, right? But there's a lot of things we can do in between, and everybody has a different way that they want it done. Like when you order a pizza, you have to negotiate, right? So this talks about negotiation. It's a wonderful tool for talking to people about sex. Also, I really like for consent. Consent is not, what is it? It's about tea. Consent is something as tea, and it's a little video, sorry that I'm blanking on the full name of it, and it's like you wouldn't force somebody to drink tea, and it really goes into the idea of consent around offering somebody a cup of tea. Consent, it's as simple as tea. That's the name of the video. and it shows a stick figure forcing a hot cup of tea down somebody's throat and not asking what type of tea they would like. And so that's a really wonderful way to break down consent as well. Masturbation. Just 2 euphemisms right there that we can think of: choking the chicken, petting the pussy. I wrote a book on masturbation in 2007 called Getting Off: A Woman's Guide to Masturbation, so I could talk about this subject for quite a while. What I will say that I just find so fascinating, first, the vibrator was the 5th appliance to be electrified, behind like the toaster, the iron, I can't remember the other 2. Also, John Harvey Kellogg and Samuel Graham, Kellogg's Corn Flakes and Graham Crackers, those 2 foods were specifically made. They were Seventh-day Adventists who believed that sexual pleasure was a really bad thing for people. So they created those 2 products to curb sexual desire. Now, of course, they didn't have sugar and other things in them. But there was a real focus on not letting people get touched or touch each other. In fact, the reason masturbation became associated with Onan, and if anybody's familiar with the story of Onan, it has nothing to do with masturbation. It has everything to do with spilling seed and withdrawing from a sexual intercourse thing, because Onan didn't want to give his dead brother's wife his sperm, because those children would have been his dead brother's babies. So it's got nothing to do with masturbation. But in the 1500s, a pamphlet came out, maybe it's the 1700s, getting my dates wrong, called Onanism and the Heinous Sin of Self-Pollution and All Its Frightful Consequences, yada, 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 yada. And it was placed in coffee shops around Europe, and people would pick them up and see a person who masturbated is like, oh, at 12 would be like this, and a person who didn't was strong and healthy. So there's a lot of fear, even media fear, around just touching yourself, which also goes into a lot of religious stuff, because you can't control what somebody's doing alone in their own room. So you got to talk about it. So think about your own views of masturbation as well. This OMGYes.com, in terms of female masturbation, it's a wonderful app for people who are like, I really don't know what to do, or I need ideas. It actually is, it's very explicit, and women are talking about their own ways of getting off. This woman talks about edging, which is something that you do when you come to the edge of orgasm, but you don't actually, you stay on the brink of orgasm without having one. So they have many different women talking about their own ways of doing it. And in the app, you can even go over with your own fingers to learn new techniques. So it's a very helpful app for female sexual pleasure. Masturbation, good reasons, sex with someone you love. It's safe sex. It helps you get to know your own body. And you don't need to be in a relationship to do it. But you can be, because you still should do it or could do it in relationships. Sorry, I hate the word should. It can help you unwind and sleep, and can stimulate the immune system, and it relieves menstrual cramps. I also, yes?
Also supposed to relieve headaches?
It is supposed to relieve headaches, and I believe it reverses the aging process. Here are 2 ways to look at the sexual response cycle. This is Masters and Johnson's original way: excitement, plateau, orgasm, and resolution. And notice too that after you have the orgasm, everything just sort of drops off. So I always talk to people about just orgasm education, that if that's the goal, what happens afterwards, right? This is the Bassan model of sexual response, which was more based on female sexual response as a circular model that women need emotional intimacy, and of course, this can be anyone, sexual stimuli, sexual arousal, desire, satisfaction, that spontaneous sex drive doesn't always happen. And in fact, another wonderful resource for female sexual pleasure, the best book that's come out in the last few years, is called Come As You Are, which really talks about, it's not about spontaneous sex drive. We should even get rid of the term drive, and looks at sexual pleasure in a whole new, from a very unique perspective. I do this with my couples. Men are like microwaves and women are like ovens. I like to tell them that when they're like, why isn't she having an orgasm in 2 seconds flat? It takes a woman a lot longer to get heated up and off, if she's going to, right? So it's a really good comparison. It should be the other way around there, but that's okay. Men are like microwaves, women are like ovens. It's Barbara Carrellis, who taught me Urban Tantra, had used this, and it's just such a great visual to help explore. Men can get aroused and off between 2 and 7 minutes, right? Women sometimes take 20 minutes just to get aroused. When I was making videos for companies, I was doing was showing one of my videos, and the girl did not have an orgasm for a very long time. And my friend came up to me after and was like, "That's weird." And I went, "Oh, so a lot of the women you've been with have not been telling you the truth about their orgasms, I see." So here, again, orgasms. Here are some ways that you can tell somebody's had an orgasm, right? If somebody's like, "How do I know?" I often say to people when they ask me, "How do I know if I had an orgasm?" If you're asking that question, odds are you're close, but you haven't gotten there. You can describe it as a sneeze or a wave for women, but also noticing what skin, does your skin color start to change? Where are your eyes? What's your breathing like? What's your heart rate like? These are all ways to indicate that you're getting closer to orgasm. And my apologies for really speeding through this. I thought this went a little longer. So this is Orgasm Inc. I'm not going to play the video right now. It is a documentary that came out on female sexual pleasure and the race to make a pill or something to help women have more orgasms. There is a pill that came out last year or 2 years ago. It got FDA approved called flibanserin. It's very controversial. It's really, some people would say that using a pill is a placebo. But in this video, it's a movie, and it's really well done about the medical community's drive and search to figure out female orgasm. And I won't give away the ending, but it's very realistic, and you'll see the depths that people will go through to try and be normal, which they think means be able to have an orgasm at the touch of a button. The name of the movie is called Orgasm Inc., and I think you can watch it all online for free at this point. On YouTube? Probably, yeah. So just for a moment about pornography, we see a lot of men in here, and I am very pro-sexual pleasure, who are really impacted by pornography and the fact that they can view it at a very young age. In fact, I'd say for ED, it's a huge thing. Also, expectations around sex. This is where a lot of kids are learning about what sex is and what it looks like. And when they see an orgy of 30 people and think that this is the ultimate sexual experience and that sex between two people isn't enough, then we need to be talking to people about sex. 9 out of 10 boys are exposed to pornography before the age of 18. I actually think it's 10 out of 10. I think when you look at research that most of the time you'll find that not one person has not been able to view it if they don't want, unless they don't have computer or television. There are certain people that definitely keep that away. So if somebody you know has been exposed to pornography and it is a child in a way that needs to be talked about, remain emotionally neutral. Okay, so you saw something. The look on your face, kids are looking, right, all the time to see what an adult's reaction is to things. Normalize the situation. It's really easy to find porn online, right? It's really easy to see sex online, yeah. Talk to the child about good, healthy sex and emotional intimacy. I loved, bless you, a friend of mine who's a sex educator told her daughter who said, I'm sexy. She said, sexy is an adult word. And I thought that was a really great way to say, like, you can be this, but this is an adult word. Educate about the problems and fallacies in porn and how it isn't real life sex. I used to teach a class with Nina Hartley, who's a porn star, called Real Sex versus Porn Sex. And those classes still go on. The Pleasure Chest is a great place to get more learning on that. But really know, these are not the way people have, this is a movie. We don't expect the Hollywood movies to be real life, but yet we don't talk about how porn isn't real life. And ask them about what they've seen and if they have any questions. And then help them create new boundaries and enforce them. So there is a thing called porn-induced ED. I see it a lot here. What I'll often do is ask people to limit their porn use if they're not going to abstain, to really reduce it and start to think more about things that can be arousing and not need the visual stimulation. A lot of people start needing the visual stimulation and then can't connect in the relationships the way that they want to. I just really liked that picture. So again, if somebody comes in with ED issues for you, you want to make sure that they go to a medical doctor. We are not medical doctors. Maybe somebody in here is, but most of us are not. And it could be any of these other reasons that they are experiencing ED. If it is psychological, you'll learn pretty quickly, and then you'll go into either it could be some type of way that they masturbate. If somebody has been trained to get off really quickly and has a way that's really hard, they grip themselves in a certain way, that can also be a part of it with women. There might be some shame around their sexual preferences. They might be shamed in their relationship. Oh, it always takes you so long to get hard. It could be any number of things, but these are also some of the causes. There are things that they can do beyond, I don't think we'll get much to these toys, but here's cock rings. Cock rings are used to keep the penis hard. They're put on when the penis is erect or semi-erect. They go over the base of the shaft and the balls, or they can just go over the base of the shaft. Some people use these and find that they help with some of the hardness issues. There are pumps. They only last as long as you pump. They're not like going to be a long-term thing. Of course, there's what they call vitamin C in some communities, Cialis, Levitra, and Viagra. And then for some men, injectables. There's also surgeries guys can get, but again, this is beyond our scope of practice and competence. What we would do is refer out, but just to know that there are options out there, and also asking them if they have tried any of these options or talk to a doctor about them. Another big thing, mismatched desires, desire discrepancy. You see that a lot in here. One thing to always remember, the low desire partner is the one who controls the sex in the relationship, always and forevermore. If one person wants to have sex 98 times and the other one wants it 97, the low desire partner still gets to decide that time. Two great books for talking about intimacy and long-term relationships, Intimacy and Desire, where David Schnarch really outlines the low desire, high desire discrepancy. And Mating in Captivity, one of my favorite things from there, she says for couples in long-term relationships, is that if you want to change things up, put a $20 bill on the nightstand and pay for a blowjob. We won't really get into this, but sensate focus is one of the things that you can do with your couples, which is touching non-genital areas to start to get more intimacy and touch. I even do sometimes object sensate focus. If my clients are having a hard time touching each other, I have them touch objects like lamps or pens and have them describe them to their partner just to start getting them used to describing touch. Core erotic blueprints is another thing I recommend to a lot of my clients. I call it the 5 love languages of sex. Jaya has just put this out last year, but there's the energetic, sensual, sexual, kinky, and shapeshifter. You can go on her website, take the quiz. I have my clients take this to see what sex language they talk, to see if it's the same as their clients, as their partners. Not as their that would be really unethical. Professional therapy never includes sex. It's a lovely pamphlet. So I'm just going to put these terms up. Is doing 3 more minutes okay?
About 2 minutes.
Okay. So swinging is not necessarily polyamory. I just wanted to get these definitions out there. Couples are single. Women, they are very anti-men on men in the swinging community, also known as the lifestyle. This is a recreational thing. They go and they swap partners a lot of the times, or they play all together. Open is a couple that independently dates each other, but dates other people, but doesn't necessarily get into relationships with other people, which is what sometimes is identified as polyamory. Solo polyamory is when one person has different relationships with each person. They can have more than one primary partner. And hierarchical polyamory is usually one primary partner, a secondary partner, tertiary partners, whatever. I know, and you need, yes, as Kamala Devi says, you need a PhD in communication to make polyamory work. That is the biggest thing they need to be able to do, is open and honest. It's called infidelity and cheating when it's not talked about. So compersion, which is really the biggest, compersion and new relationship energy are 2 of the biggest terms that people use in alternative relationship models. Compersion is feeling happiness and joy and not jealousy for your partner's happiness. And new relationship energy is that feeling you get when you first enter a relationship, also called limerence, where the butterflies in your stomach, that passion and all of that, that does go away in every relationship. They called it the 7-year itch, but it's more like the 4-year itch. You meet, you mate, you have the child. This is technically what it's about. And then you're ready to move on. We won't really, birth control and sex aids, just knowing that the IUD is the most effective form of birth control, yet the least effective, least used form of birth control. And condoms and pulling out are actually quite similar. Not as safe to not use condoms, of course. Lube is always important as well. Lubrication, communication, and relaxation, the 3 keys to great sex. And here are some additional resources, really great ones. Scarlet Teen, where I got a lot of the diagrams today. It Gets Better, a fantastic website for people who are coming out and want some hope and faith. Sex is a Funny Word, a great book for 8 to 12-year-olds. And the Unitarian Universalist Unitarian Universalist Church, their OWL program is the most comprehensive sex education program for ages K through 12. In addition, Peggy Orenstein's video on what young women believe about their own sexual pleasure and Sue J. Johnson's What We Don't Teach Our Kids About Sex are great resources for talking about touch and agency. Wrap up. And and Esther Perel's Rethinking Infidelity and Secrets to Desire in Long-Term Relationships. So we won't have time for questions in here, but I'll be around for a few minutes.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.